Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. And my co-host for today, a celebrity among us, a superstar in our orbit. My co-host today has a forthcoming book called We See Each Other, a Black trans journey through TV and film. They are also a co-host of the show FANTI on this very network. You may also know their work from such publications as Out or the Los Angeles Times. And there is also an additional book coming out later this year called Historically Black Phrases. Tre'vell Anderson, you're a multi-threat, you're a multi-hyphenate. What else do people need to know about you before we get going?
Yeah, you know, all of those things that you mentioned are true. There's a few extra things thrown in there as well, but, you know, minor things. And what you all should know is that I am a fabulous Southern belle and a church queen. And both of those things factor into my lens on the world.
Those feel like two very important factors, especially as we're going to get into another Southern belle today on the show in Reese Witherspoon and her seminal role in Legally Blonde. Did this speak to the Southern belle and church queen in you when you saw it? Or was that totally unrelated?
Totally unrelated. You know, this character in particular, Elle Woods in Legally Blonde and Legally Blonde 2 and Legally Blonde 3 and 4 and 5 to come, etc. For me, it was like Elle Woods represented like the exact opposite of what life was like for me, but exuded so much of what I wanted or felt like life should be for me. And I just latched on to it. Because of Elle Woods, I wanted to be a lawyer. Like, that's what I went to school thinking I was going to be. Newsflash, I am not a lawyer. But like, it was that pivotal for me.
Elle Woods is a performance of gender. Elle Woods is a her, the girl, is a performance of femininity. Like it has that great, like, Darren Stein, jawbreaker, pops of color, like Heather's bigger than life kind of, like the stereotyping of these characters. Like even Oz Perkins here, like David Kidney. Like everybody in this is the most heightened version of the archetype they're supposed to play. Selma Blair couldn't look more like a top button white woman in law school. And so this movie was beloved at the time that it came out, but I think still, like, it gets wrapped into the conversation at the time of, like, the chick flick.
Yeah.
When there was, like, that inherently minimized way of looking at movies for girls and gays. But she becomes this, like, iconic figure that inspires a fucking generation to go to law school.
So much. Literally. Like, there are so many folks who, I promise you, you know, Elle Woods, Legally Blonde was their, you know, villain origin story. It's the reason, you know, why they went to law school or why they got into the type of work. And, you know, I want to say this, you know, early in the podcast, that I am a Black non-binary person of trans experience who, you know, has just written a book, you know, coming out May 9th, available for pre-order right now, wherever you get Slave-worthy books, about Black trans visibility. And I have selected Elle Woods in Legally Blonde.
An icon of Black trans experience visibility.
Listen, okay? She was teaching the girls, I guess. But I think I know that there is kind of this historical usage of white women as like signifiers of difference in our media and pop culture that allows those of us who are different in more ways than that perhaps to latch onto them and sometimes see potential possibilities therein, right? And I think it's only now that we're beginning to see, you know, in mass, right, a variety of Black characters in a variety of different spaces that allows and can be, you know, points and objects of identity and identifying with for folks. But Elle Woods, you know, for me, it was a lot of like, she's in these spaces where everyone is saying that she should not be in and she's not qualified to be in. And she ultimately, when she goes back to herself, her truth, who she is, her knowledge of ammonium thioglycolate.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, like that is when, you know, she experiences this massively successful, you know, David versus Goliath, like, you know, underdog overturning and accomplishing. And for me, as someone who at the time was this young Black queer kid in South Carolina, the grandchild of a pastor, the child of a woman who ultimately was in the Army for 23 years of my life, and was a single parent throughout that time, there was something there that spoke to me about, oh, you feel different, you feel like you're not of this time, but you are of this time, and the world will make space for you because you will show them that you deserve all the space that you will take up.
Chutney, why is it that Tracy Marcinko's curls were ruined when she got hosed down?
Because they got wet?
Exactly. Because isn't it the first cardinal rule of perm maintenance that you're forbidden to wet your hair for at least 24 hours after getting a perm, at the risk of deactivating the ammonium thioglycolate?
Yes.
And wouldn't somebody who's had, say, 30 perms before in their life be well aware of this rule? And if, in fact, you weren't washing your hair, as I suspect you weren't because your curls are still intact, wouldn't you have heard the gunshot? And if, in fact, you had heard the gunshot, Brooke Wyndham wouldn't have had time to hide the gun before you got downstairs, which would mean that you would have had to have found Mrs. Wyndham with a gun in her hand to make your story plausible. Isn't that right?
It's always such a treat to have people who are and have backgrounds in journalism, like on the show. It's because like we are, you know, it's like when you go in to interview someone that you're like who's made a movie, and you ask them a question where you've done the comparative literature of their work in its entirety, and they're like, it's my job, and I'm here to talk about my job today. But that's a good point you made. I've never thought about ever. And so it's fun to have people who like just like instinctually like I connect dots and I make this not a scatter plot. And so I want to hear you talk a little bit about this, like the where we are in visibility and representation now, and what we're seeing. Like you actually, as Tre'vell, perhaps being able to see avatars that are closer to a one-to-one for yourself on screen now, but people who are now the ones putting out articles, publishing memoirs, essays, works of cultural critique about these greater options and visibility at a wide-scale level were raised as people doing the headcanoning work of you putting yourself into Elle Woods. I'm a panromantic gray asexual person, so like it's me grafting like intimate like platonic romance into best friend stories that I saw growing up, because there aren't ace romances kind of situation. So I wanted to hear about that experience of like writing about the breakthroughs now, or the options now, like coming with we see each other, knowing that you yourself were reared in a context where it had to be more headcanoning than anything else, perhaps, at least at a wide mainstream level. You could be like a deep cut fiction
you're
from
so
other countries
right.
cinema fan.
You're so right. You know, I think when people check out the book, I think they might be surprised at the items of culture that I actually discuss. Because of the ways that we, as people who come from communities that have been historically excluded and further marginalized, we often have to do that. I love, you called it headcanoning work.
Yeah, having to create the headcanon for ourselves.
Yeah, like we have to create so many different possibilities because the world is not showing us what we know to be true, and we have to latch onto these images that sometimes do not directly reflect our experience, or perhaps we are seeing or projecting something onto it because we need something that more readily holds us in the ways that we need and want to be held. And so, you know, It is so interesting because, you know, in the book, I talk about everything from Tyler Perry as Medea is a formative piece of culture for me in my life as that Black queer, you know, Southern belle that I mentioned earlier, church queen as well. I have a very soft place and complicated and complex place because of the related trans antagonisms, right, that we as trans women in films experience that very much so mirrors the same antagonisms that show up in a character like, Medea, played by a cisgender man. And so it has been interesting to craft and create a canon of my own, right, that in so many ways pushes against what may be seen as like traditionally canonical works, right, to create and craft something that, can represent a Black trans experience, but not necessarily all of the items in that canon being Black trans works because of the ways that we have been forced to, ultimately survive in the landscape of media and images that we've been given. But there's so much more on the horizon and to come, and that makes me excited.
Well, that's something that I like to shout out on this podcast whenever I can. Is just what I consider to be, as I've said, the creative genius of marginalized people who have from day one had to more artfully and like creatively and perhaps just strangely graft themselves into places in culture where nobody says they belong or they don't even exist. Like that training from an early age to create worlds and support those worlds and sustain those worlds.
I mean, I always say that for me, the Black trans imagination is the most powerful concept of life because of the ways that we have literally, made ourselves out of the depths of our mind. And often when you have not seen yourselves or slithers of yourself that are inspiring, aspiring, or uplifting in whatever capacity, when you haven't seen that, it's just even more difficult to actualize what is going on in the truth of how we live and show up in the world. And so, yeah, it gets demeaned and diminished and disregarded over and over, time and time again. And the scale of it increases depending on, how many more intersections you curve with. But there is so much possibility out there for the taking.
I've read, things you've written, like you've written profiles of Lori Harvey and Lil Nas X and Laverne Cox. And I was reading an essay you wrote after the passing of Andre Leon Talley talking about him as a possibility model for you. And while this, I would imagine that connection to you being far more profound than like what I'm currently going to ask you, but like the idea of Elle Woods was that something like a possibility model for you when you were first experiencing Legally Blonde?
Absolutely. Like it was. So I don't know where I first heard the phrase possibility model, but the reason why it resonated with me and resonates, I wanted to bring
that into this because I really appreciated reading that.
I can't remember who I took it from, but it was offered up as a replacement language for role model, right? Because role model, in my estimation and the estimation of whoever I stole this from, is that like, role model comes and makes it seem like there is, one finite path to actualize something. Possibility model changes the vantage slightly to just say, this is an option.
Yeah.
This is another option.
Yeah.
And perhaps neither one of those options is exactly yours, but you can pull something from here, put it together, shake it together, runneth over. And now you have someone amazing and fabulous such as me before you, right? And so like Andre Leon Talley specifically, I came to him, I speak about him in the book. I came to him through America's Next Top Model. on reality TV.
Same here. Yeah, him and Miss J.
Period. I also talk about Miss J as a possibility model as well. Love the combination of them. And similarly, Elle Woods was a possibility model because of what I had been conditioned to understand as, if you want to feel something, enjoy something, the person on this screen that is most likely to reflect your experience, because there ain't no black people. Regina King did come through in the sequel. We see you, Regina King. But there were no black people, and so the person you're supposed to look to is this white woman who's being shunned because she's blonde and she likes pink and she has a little doggy, and she wants an orange computer.
Okay. Hi, I'm Elle Woods, and this is Breezer Woods, and we're both Gemini vegetarians. I have a bachelor's degree in fashion merchandising from CULA, and I was a Zeta Lambda Nu sweetheart, president of my sorority, Delta Nu, and last year I was homecoming queen. Oh, 2 weeks ago, I saw Cameron Diaz at Fred Segal, and I talked her out of buying this truly heinous Angora sweater. Whoever said orange was the new pink was seriously disturbed.
It was transformative in a lot of ways in terms of just being like, somebody can move through such a restricted space as Harvard Law School is, we are told is, and you can be so good in just the truth of who you are and your lived experience that you just happen to be on the team of this big court case, and it's through you that they actually, one, get her to sign on and give you the alibi, right? But then you become the lawyer.
Yeah.
And you break the case because of how often you got perms in your life. And you know that the ammonium thioglycolate goes with the water and it will ruin and you are you kidding me? And you did it in some pink Jimmy Choos and a
come
pink,
on, Perry Mason.
Come on. Are you kidding me? Like, for me and my younger mind that was clamoring for more.
Yeah.
It opened up so many possibilities. I wanted to go to and apply to Harvard because of Legally Blonde.
But I would argue, a graduate of the Harvard of the West, Stanford University.
It was grad school, but yes, shout out to me. I did do that too.
As someone in the same sports conference, I can never root for Stanford, but I recognize I couldn't have got in, and I couldn't have done what you did. So I admit
you probably could have, and it's no shade, and it's no shade to my fellow Stanford graduates.
I was listening to a recent episode of FANTI, and you were talking about no longer being in a 9-to-5 workplace. Like, you were talking about you are no longer folded in the ways that sort of you're forced to fold yourself inward and together in a corporate working environment. And I was wondering, what was your Harvard University where you showed up and you were like, I'm fully me, perhaps. But then you were like, maybe I'm not fully me, before having to come out the other side of that developmental landmark in various people, maybe anybody's life, where they're like, no, I have the inflection point right now to decide how am I going to fold myself in this place. And if I have to do it, I have to leave. But I need to prove whether or not I can stay as myself or if I have to leave as myself.
Yeah. So I've had a number of those experiences. And I want to first say, this concept of unfolding that you're talking about is something that I got from Akweke Emezi, who is a Black trans writer. They have a memoir called Dear Cinthurin that everyone should check out. And in that book, they talk about the process that many of us have to go through when we find ourselves having to fold parts of ourselves away into ourselves in order to fit in various particular types of spaces. Some might call it code switching. Some might call it, dialing up and dialing down different parts of our identity as a means of survival and navigating spaces. And they talk about their process of unfolding into the fullness of who they are, taking up the necessary space that they should because of who they are. And Stanford, you brought up Stanford. Stanford was an experience for me. It was a 1-year program. For undergrad, I went to a college named Morehouse College in Atlanta. It's a historically black all-male institution. Martin Luther King Jr. went there. Spike Lee went there. Samuel L. Jackson, and me.
And you.
And it was a very traditional, historically Baptist type of environment. All of the stereotypes that might perhaps come to mind as I use those descriptions are in play here. And I was coming into myself as a black queer person at the time. That's the context. So much to say, by the time I left Morehouse, I felt very secure in who I was and how I was beginning to show up in the world and who I thought I was. And so I got to Stanford, in which I could go 3 days on campus without seeing another black person, except the one other black person in my journalism program. It was an experience that I always say it tested me. It tested the person I said that I was coming out of Morehouse College. It was like, oh, you're now in this space where, the education isn't centered on you. You do need to, or I felt compelled to, call out anti-blackness and racism in the instruction that we were being given about, how to be good journalists. And that created a push and pull relationship throughout that program. And, ultimately I doubled down and it was fine. I made the experience what I made it and got the hell out of there with my degree. But then going to the Los Angeles Times and being at the Los Angeles Times, a traditional legacy newspaper newsroom,
very much,
and always knowing that I wanted to cover black folks, I wanted to cover queer and trans people. There were multiple instances in which I was told, right, in both explicitly and in not so many words, that like the types of stories I wanted to do weren't welcomed, and that I ultimately wasn't welcomed. And going through that experience as a young journalist while also navigating my own gender identity journey throughout that period as well, created internal conflict, right? And ultimately, I left the LA Times. I went to Out Magazine as their director of culture and entertainment, and being at a queer publication, right, allowed me in so many different ways to begin unfolding.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have to, lie about objectivity. Right? Quote unquote.
Did you surprise yourself in the process of that unfold? Like, as those folds were coming out, where you're like, shit, that's there? Oh my God, like what? Or were you were you very present and self-aware of sort of like the details of yourself and the facets of yourself that you were able to like live more fully into?
No, it was a journey. As I was leaving the LA Times, like that last year or so, I started doing a lot more pieces that were commentary essays that were about whatever was happening in culture. So when America's Next Top Model was announced to be canceled, I did this essay about Andre Leon Talley and Miss J, right? I did, when Prince died, I did an essay about Prince as a representation of, gender expansivity in media. And those were the pieces that most connected with audiences. Those were the pieces that got the most feedback, good and bad. And so as I went to Out Magazine, where I no longer had to lie, right, about the realities of our lives as people who report and produce news, I was able to lean more into myself, which allowed me to unfold greater into ultimately, right, like just writing stuff that grew out of my experience, and substantiating it, right, with the reporting that I had been doing at the time.
We are going to take a quick break, and we will have more with Tre'vell about Elle Woods and if we've really crossed the, quote, transgender tipping point in culture. Then, at the end of everything, I will have one quick thing about the biggest news in Hollywood today, and that is the Writers Guild of America strike.
Hi, I'm Travis McElroy.
And I'm Teresa McElroy.
And we're the host of Schmanners.
We don't believe that etiquette should be used to judge other people.
No, on Schmanners, we see etiquette as a way to navigate social situations with confidence.
So if that sounds like something you're into,
join us every Friday on Maximum Fun or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, it's John Moe, inviting you to listen to Depresh Mode with John Moe, where I talk about mental health and the lives we live with all kinds of people. Famous writers.
David Sedaris, welcome to Depresh Mode.
Thanks so much for having me.
Movie stars.
Jamie Lee Curtis, welcome to Depresh Mode.
I am happy to be here.
Musicians.
I am in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm talking to Amy Mann.
Great to talk to you.
And song exploders. Rishikesh Hirway, welcome to Depresh Mode.
Thanks so much for having me.
Everyone's opening up on Depresh Mode on Maximum Fun.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I'm talking to Tre'vell Anderson, whose new book is called We See Each Other, a Black trans journey through TV and film. And we've been getting into the many reasons why Tre'vell felt seen by, of all people, Elle Woods from Legally Blonde.
You're not smart enough, sweetie.
Wait, am I on glue, or did we not get into the same law school, Warner?
Well, yeah, but...
But what? We took the same LSATs, and we're taking the same classes.
I know, but... Come on, Elle, be serious. You can do something more valuable with your time.
I'm never gonna be good enough for you, am I?
Oh, come on.
Just forget it. I'll show you how valuable Elle Woods can be.
A thing that I think ages so well about Elle in Legally Blonde is this, like, assertion that, like, because Elle is stereotypes. Elle is cliches of what, like, this bimbo sorority girl would be. The characters you're not meant to root for are the ones who are poking fun at the stereotypes. And I understand that, like, I'm just so interested in this conversation right now around, like, you know, the idea of, like, on a red carpet, like, ask her more when that was having its moment in conversation. And it's like, yeah, ask her more, but also maybe she wants to talk about her dress. Like,
And that's fine.
And, like, I think what you have in Elle Woods is that it's you can break the case, and it's also okay to want to talk about the dress.
Yeah.
And, like, you can be, like, it is not, we don't just want the GBF character, but, like, the gay best friend, like, persona and, like, all the wonderful details and sort of hyperbolicness and bigness that can go into that particular trope, like, that is so many friends of mine. Like, that is real, and that is someone I love. And so I like that this movie, like, I love its love of stereotypes in this, like, in the positive celebratory sense that, like, we get kind of robbed of being able to celebrate archetypes sometimes.
Yeah.
Because representation of anybody that's not just some bro has been so flattened that it's like, no, but, like, I want that. So,
Yeah.
like, I want to identify
that's
with
so
that, like,
good.
cutout of a person in all of its sort of easily accessible parts. Because, like, I know those people. I know Mary Sue's. I'm friends with Mary Sue's. They're not villains.
That is so good, and you're so right. There are so many options that I think of like, really bad characters, like assholes, bitches, just a whole bunch of motherfuckers, you know? But we know those people. And, like, yeah, you know, the only representation to be
only that
of that, right? But we can have some of those too, and we also don't have to make a hierarchy out of them, right? They can all exist on the exact same plane. We can have your monogamous, two white men and their twins and their dog, right? And we can also have, the hookers and, as my grandmother would say, the sex workers, get the drug addict. Give me it all. It reminds me.
Give me it all.
This reminds me of something. I often repeat this. Jen Richards, who is a trans actress, said to me a number of years ago when I was interviewing her about trans representation, and she said that at the time she felt like we were still in the Sidney Poitier phase of trans representation, in which all of the trans characters that you saw had to be these unassailable, nice, against the trope types of characters as a means of the first step in the journey toward greater and better trans representation, and likening it to what we know was Sidney Poitier's role in the industry at his time. But we want the hot messes. We want the trashy girls too. We want it all, because we are all of those things, and everybody deserves, in my opinion, I would love a world in which everyone can see the direct reflection of them where they are then in their life on screen if they want to. And we're not there.
The first character I ever remember registering as a queer character on screen was Hollywood in the movie Mannequin.
Yes!
The window display designer Hollywood.
Yes.
Who was, I think, a very Andre Leon Talley-esque figure in his height and his fashion and his bigness. And that is clearly a character that is inserted as a gay best friend, a sassy gay friend, but is also kind of the heart and soul of the movie, and is also part of the heroic ending that it has.
Oh, please don't tell anyone you saw me dressed like this. I have a reputation to uphold.
Oh, my lips are sealed, buddy. I really appreciate this demonstration.
That's it! A demonstration. I will create a media event. You call the newspaper boys and girls. The headline will read, "If Jonathan is fired, Hollywood flies." Excuse me while I step out into the window ledge.
I'm not going to trust an Andrew McCarthy movie from the 1980s to be we're so proud of this person for being everything that they are and we want to celebrate that. No, I think they're making gag at the expense of someone who's swishy and someone who's ostentatious. But watching that as an adult and celebrating and wanting to be around people like that in my own life, wanting to surround myself with people like that, I look back at that and I'm like, man, I'm really glad I saw that when I was little, and I thought Hollywood was the best.
It's one of those things where we can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? we can recognize that.
I feel like that's the premise of FANTI, is we can walk and chew gum at the same time, guys.
It is, because listen, life is complicated. Things are complex, y'all. It's not all black and white. You're getting on my nerves, right? There's a whole lot of gray. I often say that, as a non-binary person, I don't exist in the pink or the blue. I exist in the lavender expanses in between. Oh, right?
Yeah, that's good.
And so, I'm all about that gray area because things are just really complex over here. And so we can say that, in my, I was a sociology major as an undergrad. And so I always say I'm a sociologist by training. And so with my and so, with my sociological lens, I can look at something and be like, oh, this is horrible representation for black queer people. This is it is a stereotype. It's super overblown. It's super effeminate or whatever, right? And also, so many people felt represented and will feel represented by that and found community in that and found a piece of themselves on screen for the first time, perhaps, right, that they could identify with in terms of the types of people they either want to be or be around, right, and be in community with. And we can do both, and it's okay to do both. We don't want, you don't gotta, what's the saying, throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Oh, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
That one. We don't gotta do do that. So, but people like to, right, simplify things so much. But there's just so much nuance.
Well, and I think with Elle too, what you get is a character who, like, listen, you can still be a hot girl and get taken seriously. It might lengthen your rope, but, like, you know what? Be a hot girl.
Period.
If you feel like a hot girl, if you are a hot girl, then do not become less of a hot girl to succeed in the environment that demands that you not be that. No.
Period.
No, you stay the hot girl.
Listen, you know what? You are speaking to my life right now, Jordan. Okay.
I want to hear you talk about being a hot girl.
Because guess what? I can't help it that I'm a hot girl, right?
It's not a choice. It's not a choice.
I am just living out my divine purpose on this earth, right? And it's to stand out. I can't listen. This Zoom. I've had these, you know, lame fabrics behind me this entire fucking pandemic, and every time I hop on Zoom, everyone's always like, "Whoa! Oh my God, so much energy!" What? And I'm like, "Well, where's your energy? What do you mean?
Yeah.
This is normal. This is who I am. This is who I am." Okay, and so. And so it's just like, you know, I have realized that the beauty of life lies in you being who you know yourself to be. And for me, that is a, you know, loud, you know, sometimes rambly, lover of Black movies and Black films in particular, who also is a hot girl journalist. You know, I want to wear the short. I'm going to put on a short skirt, okay? And go into the conference room like everybody else. Because why not? Why not?
Go into the conference room like everybody else. You know? And you're going to show Selma Blair possibility models.
Period. Okay, and also, you know, for the Selma Blairs out there, if you want to wear your black turtlenecks with your single, you know, rung of pearls and you know, your pantsuits, we love that too. That's fine. Yeah. I want everybody do them. I just need everybody to do them, and don't be mad at me doing me, because doing me looks a little different than you doing you.
Thanks for inviting me, girls. This party is super fun.
Nice outfit.
Oh, I like your outfit too, except when I dress up as a frigid bitch, I try not to look so constipated.
She's horrible. You've got the ring, sweetie.
This is a fascinating Reese Witherspoon moment, because this is like the tale of two Reeses. This is the Reese fork in the road, where we go from like freeway and election and fear to like the hello sunshine Reese that we know today. And I think it's fascinating to sort of look at this like in retrospect and be like, wow, this hit. And she was like, I am Elle fucking Woods. And like my career will kind of reflect an Elle Woodsian arc compared to like the neo-exploitation cinema.
It was giving girl boss very early, okay?
Yes!
Okay.
Yes!
Absolutely. I often say that Reese Witherspoon is, you know, one of the very short list of white women that I like. She always knows to, like, you know, don't keep your mouth shut, because you know sometimes people just want to jump into every conversation, and you don't need to be in every conversation, because then you start saying stuff and then I gotta fight you because now I know how you really feel, and it's like, damn, I can't watch, you know, X show the same anymore because you know you hate people like me. You know,
you spoiled it.
You spoiled it, right? And Reese Witherspoon is someone who has not yet spoiled anything for me, and we're gonna you know keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, we're gonna cross our fingers
knock on wood and
yeah.
everything.
You know, I love her being tipsy and saying to a police officer, like, do you know who I am? Like, I want that. That absolutely I want to know about.
That's what we want in our celebrities, okay? But you're so right to like take to chart, I would say, so much of what we see as who she is today back to Legally Blonde. And it was, I mean, listen, They got a musical out now about the movie. Like, who would have thunk it, right?
It's amazing to look back at, like, right before Legally Blonde, she did like a rom-com called Overnight Delivery. I don't know if you ever saw that one.
I haven't.
But it's her and Paul Rudd. And he thinks his girlfriend, Christine Taylor, who goes to a different college, has cheated on him. And he mails her, like, a terrible, spiteful package that, like, is, like, a real fuck off. And he realizes he was wrong the very next day, so he has to... And he sent it overnight delivery, so he has to race the package across the country. I don't remember how Reese ends up on this road trip with him, but this is an era of Reese Witherspoon where she's A, brunette, and B... she's like the surly girl in the passenger seat of the car. Like Reese Witherspoon is playing like the reality bites girl compared to like the pretty blonde Christine Taylor. Like that's where we were selling Reese Witherspoon circa 2000.
Trips.
Ivy Miller.
Thought the DJ said Ivy on Trap.
On Trap is my stage name. Gotta go for that Catholic schoolgirl slut thing.
Legally Blonde changed a lot of lives, including Reese Witherspoon's.
I wanted to know, would Tre'vell Anderson take the same approach to getting into Harvard that Elle Woods did by making a poppy, kicky video package, like bikini clad in the pool with like a drink?
Oh, hi. My name is Elle Woods. And for my admissions essay, I'm going to tell all of you at Harvard why I'm going to make an amazing lawyer.
Is that your route, or what route are you taking to get into Elle Woods into Harvard?
You know, the route that I need is... So I always tell people that I'm great on paper, but I'm even better in person, okay?
Right.
Like... Yeah. You read my work, I hope you feel like I'm great on paper. You know, if you look at, you know, the little bit of career that I've had, I think she's cute, great on paper. But when I get in the room, I'm blowing you away. I'm knocking your socks off. I'm knocking your wig back. Like, I'm tearing it, right? And so... You know, I would opt hopefully for an in-person interview. I don't want to do the video. I need an in-person interview. Yeah. That way, one, my outfit's gonna be real nice, so you're gonna get a little something, you know, because the visual is important. And then I get to mesmerize them with my brilliance in person. I love seeing the mental calculation that happens on people's face when I walk into the room as, you know, the candidate, or as, in this case, the candidate, but as
that must be
as
a very
journalist.
frequent part of your experience. Like I'm sure that's a training you've had really ingrained to like just chart every micro movement of a person's posture and face.
And because part of it is about, is this going to remain a safe environment for me? As I realize you realizing the truth of what is in front of you is, am I going to have to, you know, check out the emergency exit? And so, right, it's about survival. But also, you know, as a trained sociologist,
yes. I'm sorry I didn't lead with that. I'm sorry I didn't open with that in your intro. Trained sociologist, Tre'vell Anderson.
You know, I like to think that I, you know, am just like observant of those, you know, specific things. And you're right. You know, there have been, particularly when I was working at the LA Times, there are plenty of instances when, you know, the talent is told, oh yeah, you're going to do an interview at the LA Times. This is before I guess I, you know, had a little bit of a name, if you will.
Sure.
And then I would walk in my Payless pumps and, you know, H&M jeans or whatever, click-clacking. And I could always see the mental calculation on their faces of like, you know, one, the black people being like, oh, the journalist is black, but then everyone else being like, oh, is it a man? Is it a woman? And you know, is one of them transgenders? So what are we doing? You know, no one actually said those things, but like that's the voice that I put to their face.
You can decode that.
Yes, and so like, you know, it's just I am very used to it now, and it had to get to a place where like I didn't allow those visual cues to like throw me off or make me think that I somehow, did not belong in those spaces or should not be doing those things. Now I look at it as, oh, you don't know my brilliance yet, and that's fine. By the end of our conversation, you'll be mesmerized, you know?
It is with passion, courage of conviction, and strong sense of self that we take our next steps into the world. Remembering that first impressions are not always correct. You must always have faith in people. And most importantly, you must always have faith in yourself.
Was there a point when you started noticing, or was there a point, I guess, when you noticed that, you know, and it's a work in progress, but people of my intersectional experience, it doesn't seem like they will have to graft onto Elle Woods anymore to find their models. Like, do you, like, is there a point at which, like, if you have hope, that you kind of started noticing there was cause for hope, that, like, you can go on to write We See Each Other, Black Trans Journey through TV and film, like, wow, I'm starting to have material in the present at not just a, like, deep indie cinema level, perhaps, where when I write this piece, when I write something hypothetical like this, Port Existed, like, I will have material that I can draw from in the now that is what will be the Elle Woods to people of the present. Like, inspiring them to go to law school and such.
You know, for a lot of people, including myself, the first, like, you know, actually, not including me. Not I was about to lie. For a lot of people, Laverne Cox on Orange Is the New Black was their first, you know, Black trans woman celebrity. Not a Black trans character, right? But a Black trans woman with a huge level of notoriety and acclaim and whatnot. And there was an article at the time on Time Magazine. The transgender tipping point is what...
The transgender tipping point,
is what they called it. And it actually had a very pivotal moment for me personally, which I talk about in the book. I do think that Laverne Cox and the celebrity and visibility around her at that time was a shift of sorts. Pose was another shift of sorts.
Yeah.
But
yes,
I am reticent to pat the industry on the back.
Totally.
You know, for because we've got so much more to go, you know? There've been a host of glimmers. Even Tangerine, the movie Tangerine, was a glimmer of a moment. There was a foreign language film that won the Oscar, Una Mujer Fantástica, that was led by a trans woman, Daniela Vega. She presented at the Oscars. There have been these glimmers of progress, but we don't have a Black trans movie star. We you know, like, we don't have a Black trans woman, right, who's number one on the call sheet in major productions. There was Eva Raine in Billy Porter's Amazon movie Anything's Possible, but Eva Raine is not a movie star, and it's no shade to her, love to her, but she was a newcomer. You know, so, like, there's always more room to grow, and more things to be done to reflect what we say is this promised land of, you know, representation, visibility, and inclusion, that every folks say they're in. So shout out to the glimmers, shout out to the small wins, because they are important and they do chip away, right? But, like, you know, it's a big old beast that we chip it away at.
Okay, I guess my last question then, my very, very last question to you then would be, what was your immediate experience of encountering the bend and snap? Were you like, I'm going to make this a part of my repertoire? Did you have your own equivalent in your own life? Was this an influential
I have always had bad knees, okay? I have always had bad knees. And, you know, they're in the scene, in the bend and snap scene, right? Like, they are getting down, okay? And so I don't know why in my childhood head I was like, oh, let me try to remix it, because they put my own little twist on it, right? Yeah. I don't have the knees for that, and so because you gotta engage your core and all of that to do it right, because there is a right way and there is a wrong way. For the record.
Okay, I'm going to show you a little maneuver that my mother taught me in junior high. In my experience, it has a 98% success rate of getting a man's attention, and when used appropriately, it has an 83% rate of return on a dinner invitation.
Wow.
It's called the bend and snap. Watch this. I think I dropped something on the floor that I need to pick up. So you bend and snap. See? Come on, you try.
But yes, you know what happens in, movies sometimes when they're trying to show that like a person is like, on drugs or, mentally transported elsewhere, and like everything goes to white, and then, you start falling in some sort of galaxy into the new possible world that said drug or intoxication has led them to. That is what happened to me with the bend and snap. There is pre-bend and snap and post-bend and snap life, and I have not been the same since.
They've not been the same since. Tre'vell Anderson, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been so wonderful to have you, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you again so much to Tre'vell Anderson. The book, once again, is called We See Each Other, and it's out right now. You can purchase this book. You should purchase this book. And Tre'vell also narrated the audiobook. If you are an Angelino like us, and you want to get caught in traffic, but still read We See Each Other, you can have Tre'vell put it right into your ears directly. And there's also a 9-episode podcast series of the same name that just premiered right here on Maximum Fun with Tre'vell and co-host Shar Jossell. If you're a fan of Feeling Seen and you like this conversation, We See Each Other is going to be really right up your alley. And now one quick thing before I go, which is that the Writers Guild of America, the WGA, the union of writers who write the films and the TV shows that give you the characters that you love, and yes, at times help you feel seen, that union is on strike right now because their demands for equitable treatment and secured futures and assurances from creative studios that their jobs will not be turned obsolete by AI, which is not a replacement for the skill and craft and art and science of screenwriting. There's so many things, so many easy demands, truly, that the Writers Guild is making of the studios that pay them. Easy because they are demands that seem to coincide with basic human decency and treating screenwriting like it is the career it has long, forever been in this industry, and not like it's a hobby that you support with side jobs because you can't afford to live as a career screenwriter anymore. I just wanted to bring this up because this podcast stands with the WGA. This podcast stands with the writers. Without the writers, there would be nothing, whether that is in journalism or that is in screenwriting, two professions, Hollywood and journalism, where for some reason the writers always seem to be the last ones considered and the lowest paid people in any corporate structure, despite the fact that everybody else makes money off the things that they create, the things that they write. This podcast stands with the writers, union strong, WGA strong. We are pulling for you guys out there. They are picketing around the city of Los Angeles. So if you see writers out there holding signs, protesting for their rights as workers and their rights as, again, people to be treated with basic decency by their employers, then give them a honk as you drive past. And that's it. That's all I want to say about it. That's our show. You can follow us on Twitter at FeelingSeenPod, or you can send us an email at feelingseen@maximumfun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm JorCrew on Twitter. Our theme music is by Andrew Eben. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned.
Audience supported.